start with respect to locators in Selenium. Okay, so locators basically, see, whenever we are using, whenever we want to locate a particular element, okay, whenever we want to locate a particular element with respect to driver.find element or driver.find elements, okay. So in that, whenever we are dealing with respect to driver.find element or driver.find elements, which is basically like find elements are used in order to locate a single element, right? Whereas find elements are used to locate a list of web element, correct? So in that particular case, we go with respect to locators, fine. So basically there are 8 locators in Java. Not in Java, sorry. In Selenium, we have 8 locators. We have ID, we have name, class name, tag name, link text, partial link text, CSS selector, and XPath. Okay. So these are the 8 locators that we have with respect to Selenium, and we mostly used these locators whenever we want to interact with a particular web element. Okay, whenever we want to interact with a web element, we go with respect to this locators. Okay, the locators are what are the different locators that are present in Selenium? We have ID, name, class name, tag name, link text, partial link text, CSS selector, and XPath. So these are the 8 locators that we have in Selenium, where those are used in order to interact with any element on the web page. So let me try to launch this particular website. What was the website? Automation testing. So we have launched this particular website, right? So here now you can see that in this particular website there are multiple elements, right? We have home, we have register, we have web table, we have switch to. So all these are elements, right? Now for example, whenever you start writing a particular XPath, for it might be this web page, okay, you make use of this particular tag names, right? For example, if you want to interact with this web table, then you go with respect to this anchor tag. And if you are trying to deal with something else, this single frame, you deal with this EA tag again, right? If you are dealing with this iframe, we go with iframe tag or H5 tag, right? So like that, we try to make use of different tags in order to locate that particular element, right? Now there might be some other specific tags. For example, if I am considering this DOM structure, okay, if suppose I am having any ID, for example, I'm just trying to find an ID. Okay, let me try to find an ID // and @ID. If it is present, it will help me. Yeah, see, here you can see an ID, right? What the ID is? Header ID is equals to header, right? This is the particular tag and this is the particular attribute that we have found, this one, right? So this is a kind of locator. Okay, ID is a kind of locator. For example, if you consider here, see, we have first ID as a locator. So this will help us in finding the element by ID attribute, right? This will help us in identifying a web element with the help of ID attribute. For example, if suppose you want to find this particular element header with ID, we don't have to write the entire thing because ID will be unique for that particular tag name. It will be unique for that particular tag name. You cannot find header as an attribute and ID is equals to header anywhere other than this particular attribute. See, for example, if I am trying to write it as header, it will give me directly one of one finding, right? It is giving me directly one of one finding. I don't want to add anything to this particular XPath in order to locate that particular web element, right? Because it is unique. ID will always be unique with respect to a web page. Okay, it will be unique with respect to a web page. For example, if you consider any other ID, for example, let us consider another attribute here. Okay, let us consider the second one. Second one is with respect to the single. This is the frame that is being located. So if you consider this particular ID, it will be again unique. It will be one of one finding, right? So in order to help us with this approach, Selenium has directly provided the locator. The locator is by.id. How to find that? It is very simple. We have to go with driver dot find element. Here whenever we are trying to write by.xpath, we will directly write by.id like this, and we will pass that header header like this. Okay, so this will help us in interacting with what element? An element which is having id, which is having header as a attribute value and id as an attribute, right? In that particular case, it will try to help us. Okay, so in this case, which will be the element that will be interacting with? The element that will be interacting with will be the header. Okay, that will be the element in which we will be interacting with. By.id. id is nothing but it is an unique element on the web page. So instead of writing with the help of XPath, Selenium directly provides us this kind of locator called as id in order to interact. Okay, so this is one locator. By how do we use this? Driver dot find element by dot id. Now whenever we are using driver dot find elements, okay, whenever we are using driver dot find elements, it will return us list of web elements. See, just observe here, find elements, say list of web element, right? Whenever we want to locate a list of web elements, okay, in that case we go with driver dot find elements. Now as id is unique, right? id is unique. So with respect to id, whenever it is a unique element, find elements will return us list of web elements. So how many elements we can find in the list? Single element we can find. So what will be the size of the list that we will be returning? It will be 1, right? How many elements will be getting? Say I'll just try to print this particular size of the list. System.out.println find elements dot size, right? I'll try to just print the size of this particular list that we have extracted. So let me try to run a Java application. See, now here you can see it will launch automation testing.in/frames, and then it will try to find that particular web element id with header, and it will try to print the size of with respect to the find elements that we have found. So it should print 1. See, it is printing 1 element because id is only one element. Right here in this particular web page, id is only one element. So due to which we are returning the size as 1. Okay. So when do we go with by.id? When we have a locator, when we have a tag name, when we have an attribute as id and its value should be there. In that case, we go with respect to id. Now, when do we go with respect to name? Similarly, as we found with respect to id, there will be one more attribute which will help us in inspecting an element with the help of a class name, right? For example, like this. Let me try to write. What is the locator? Next locator, it is the name. Finds element by name attribute, right? Name attribute. Now let us try to find that name attribute. // @name. So all the locators, all the tags which has name as the attribute we can find, right? So here you can see this is viewport as the name. The other element is iframe. Iframe is a tag name and attribute name is single frame, right? Name is equals to single frame. So whenever you want to deal with respect to a attribute that is name, in that case we can go with respect to this by.name locator, right? For example, like this. Driver dot find element by.xpath. Okay, let me try to remove this. Driver dot find element by.xpath. No, we should not go with by.xpath. We should go with respect to by.name. like this, and then provide that particular name here. For example, in our case it is single frame, right? Now when do we go with this locator? When we want to identify a particular frame in our XPath case, right? This will be the frame XPath. Then we will write driver dot switch to dot frame. We pass this particular frame XPath. Okay. So whenever you are dealing with respect to an ID, whenever you are dealing with respect to an tag name, whenever we want to locate an element with the help of name attribute, then we go with respect to driver dot find element by dot name. Okay, so it will help us in locating an web element with an attribute name. Next we have is with respect to class name. Whenever we have an attribute with class, in that particular case we go with respect to class name. For example, consider our website here. Let us try to write a class and a name. Let us see whether I'll be able to find a class name. See, whenever we are having a particular class name, by dot class name, this is by dot name. Okay, whenever we have an attribute with respect to by dot name, by dot id, whenever we have an attribute with by dot class name, in that case we go with respect to this locator. Now let us try to first find by dot class name, whether we have a class and a name. Okay, here we don't have that particular attribute. In order to find that particular class name, let me try to find with respect to like this, whether we have, no, we don't have, right? So in this particular web page we don't have an attribute with class name. If you are having an attribute with class name, we can go with this locator, right? Now when to go with respect to this particular tag name? Tag name is nothing but, see, what are the tags that we have here, guys? We have tags like with respect to div. To go with respect to a tag name, when we go with respect to a tag name is whenever we want to locate a particular HTML tag with respect to a tag name. For example, consider here. For example, if you want to locate an web element with respect to div, in that case we go with respect to a tag name. For example, if you want to locate a particular web element with the help of iframe, right? So in that case what I will do, I'll just try to write / iframe like this, right? Then we are trying to locate a particular web element with respect to an iframe. Okay, in this case we are locating with an, in this case we are locating a web element with respect to an iframe. The next we have linked text. Linked text, partial linked text. Let us understand this particular locator together. Okay, for example, what is the link that we have here? See, the link that we have here is, we have register, we have web table, right? These are all the links that we have. So for this, in order to locate this particular links, how we can deal with, we can make use of the text that is present. Okay, the text that is present, let me try to go directly to the normal page. See, here the link is sign in, right? So what is the link text? This sign in is the link text, right? In this case, sign in, skip sign in, this is also a link text. This is a link, right? So in order to make use of a particular link, see, if you click on this, it will take you somewhere. So that is a link. If you click on this, enter, okay, this is not taking you anywhere. For example, let us consider any other link. So let me try to make use of skip sign in. Let me click on this web table. So this is taking us to a web table page. This is a link. So like that, wherever we are finding a kind of link, that can be considered as a link. Okay, and those text that is being displayed with respect to that particular link can be considered as an text. Now for example, if you want to locate a web element with this web table, then you can use this as an entire text and you can make use inside the locator. Driver.find element by dot link text, like this, right? We can make use of this. If suppose we don't want to use entire web table, we just want to use web, then we can go with respect to by dot partial link text, like this. Okay, When to go with a link text and when to go with a partial link text? When we want to locate a particular web element on the web page with respect to the text of the link. In that case, we go with respect to link text and partial link text. Okay. The next locator that we have is CSS selector. CSS selector is a very important locator because CSS selector is unidirectional. It is not bidirectional as XPath. In the XPath, we can go following sibling, we can use preceding sibling, but with respect to the CSS selector, we can go with it is unidirectional. And when to go with CSS selector is when we want to locate some specific elements. Like for example, if you want to find the background color of this particular cell, okay, email, the background color. In that case, we go with respect to this particular CSS selector. Okay, this will help us in extracting some particular element related to background, related to color. Okay, for example, if I try to type background here, see, here we have background. For this particular web page, we have a background, right? Background color, transparent, height, 280 pixel. So if you want to extract this kind of properties, if you want to extract this kind of properties, we go with respect to the CSS selector. The CSS selector usually help us in extracting the background color, the bold, the italic, those kind of text. It will help us in extracting. Okay, so that is CSS selector locator. The finally is the XPath. XPath is the most commonly used, and when to go with XPath is like whenever we are trying to deal with respect to either multiple elements or with respect to bidirectional or a dynamic web element. If you are trying to handle, we can go with respect to the XPath. How to handle dynamic web element? We can make use of different methods that are present with respect to the XPath. Like for example, following sibling, preceding sibling, contains, text. So those examples can be considered when to go with respect to the XPath or to handle the dynamic web element. Now let us see when to use which locator. Okay, if suppose you consider ID as an XPath or a locator to find, okay, then it should be the requirement should be it should be fastest and it should be reliable in the sense, for example, this particular ID that we have considered, it should not change. Okay, it should not change on the next launch of the website. Okay, whatever the ID that we have considered, it should not change with respect to the ID value that we have taken. Today it is header, tomorrow it should not be header 1. Okay, if it is reliable, if it is unique, only then we can go with respect to the ID. If suppose today it is ID is equals to header, tomorrow it changes to something else, then it doesn't create sense of making use of ID, right? It doesn't create sense. So whenever we are dealing with an element where ID is unique and it is not changing on the build wise or with respect to day to day, in that case we go with respect to the ID. ID is very fast when compared to XPath, when compared to CSS selector. ID is fast because it is unique element, so it will identify very fast. In that case we can go with respect to the ID. When do we go with respect to name? Okay, when do we go with respect to the name locator is when we don't have ID but name is unique. Okay, in that case we go with respect to the name. And when do we go with respect to this grouping or the CSS class? When we have an attribute as class name, in that case we go with respect to a class name attribute. When do we go with respect to CSS selector? When we want to identify the complex attributes or the dynamic elements with respect to a web page. Complex attributes might be background, what is the size of that particular web element. In that case we go with respect to the CSS selector. Okay, and XPath, when do we go with XPath? When we are navigating in the DOM structure with respect to a relationship. Like for example, it might be parent relationship or a child relationship. In that case we go with respect to an XPath. Okay, so these are the various locators that we have in Selenium. The locators are ID, name, class name, tag name, link text, partial link text, CSS selector, XPath. So there are 8 locators that we have in Selenium. Very important interview question, that can you name the 8 locators that we have? So we have to name the 8 locators. Okay. And when majorly used locators are ID, XPath, CSS selector are the mainly used. Depending upon the requirement, we go with your name and class name, but widely used is XPath because XPath is used. It provides various methods, okay, like contains, following sibling, preceding sibling, contains text in order to locate a web element. So widely used is XPath. Depending upon the requirement, we can switch to other locators.